Jumping In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And here we are once again, would you believe? It is a Saturday night, it is 9 o'clock on Manx Radio and probably elsewhere as well, which means it's time for Jumping In, the best in modern and contemporary jazz with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's Jumping In. And as we have celebrated International Women's Day earlier in the week, we thought we'd have our own celebration of International Women in Jazz on this week's show. Jazz has always had its equality issues over the years, both with race and gender, but that is undoubtedly changing, with musicians themselves always having appreciated sheer talent, irrespective of creed or colour. I'm glad to say today the women in jazz are not only in front of the band as vocalists, but are also often the main composers, lead soloists, or indeed the driving force behind the drums with many of the top bands we have today. So who's engendered themselves to your equal opportunity ears this week, H?
Well, there's so many to choose from. I'm spoiled for choice. I've gone for a couple of newies I've been really enjoying. Melissa Eldana, 12 stars new and out in Blue Note on the turntable. Muchly over the last few days, cracking stuff indeed. Julieta Eugenio from Argentina. Also, we might even dip back in time with a bit of Norma.
And for me, well, some brightly coloured energy, some jazz royalty, a road less travelled, and a new space, but to give me an artist who found fame originally as a Korean indie pop singer, prior to enrolling at Boston's prestigious music jazz school at Berkeley and subsequently winning the Duke Ellington Big Band Composition Prize. Here's Relentless Mind from Jai Hee Lee's 2021 release, Daring Mind. can't argue with that, really, can you? Jai Lee and her orchestra with Relentless Mind from last year's release, the album Daring Mind. Produced by renowned composer and band leader Darcy James Argue, inspired by the hectic pace of life in New York, and with some of New York's finest in the band, including Quincy Natchoff and Jeremy Powell on saxes, Sean Jones and John Lake on trumpet, Alan Ferber and Jennifer Warburton, we had her album on recently, on trombones, Adam Birnbaum on the piano, and many others. And Daring Mind is available now on the Motima label.
Very fine sound. I enjoyed that. I have heard of her. Yes, don't have any of her material at home, but I think I might have heard her on the radio or reviewed somewhere and thought she sounded interesting, and she does indeed. Yet another name to look out for. As is Melissa Eldana. I say look out for. She's actually been around for a while now. I had the great pleasure of seeing her, albeit we didn't do an interview, a few years ago at the Pizza Express when she was there with her Crash trio, as she called it. She's now with her own lineup she's been working with for a year or two. She's moved on and up, perhaps we should say. Her debut on Blue Note is just out. It's called 12 Stars, already garnering some great reviews. I can already see this one, and I would tip it myself, if not to be on my own list, then to be on other reviewers' albums of the year list. It's tasteful. It's definitely moved on from her sort of acolyte Sonny Rollins, albeit the echoes are still there, of course. But it's more complex, it's more melodic, it's taking on a sort of more unique sounds. Have a listen to this, the first track on the album. It's called Falling. Falling, Melissa Aldana on her debut Blue Note album called 12 Stars. The 12 stars in relation, or the 12 stars she's talking about, is all to do with tarot and a sceptre, apparently. Representative of power over life is where it comes from. I think she might well be into tarot. It was written during lockdown, the pandemic. She says at the beginning of the pandemic it was a time of very intense, painful change for me. I felt paralysed and scared, but then realised this paralysis wasn't the answer, and I was struggling to make sense of what I was feeling and started to understand the importance of acceptance and forward motion. Falling, that track, she says, the first composition of my album, the tune I was writing when I felt that everything in my life was falling apart. At the start of the pandemic, everything I knew changed externally, and that was the beginning of a very deep personal process and the beginning of my journey composing the music for 12 Stars. You can feel the music is intimate, is so deeply personal in many ways, complex, melodic. It does repay repeated listening. As I say, I can see this one cropping up on several albums of the year already, even though I know we're only in March. Well worth checking out. Just out. It's with her band she's been playing with a while now. Melissa Aldana herself on tenor sax, of course. Lager Lunt listed as playing guitars and gizmos, so I take it he's doing some of the electronics you heard subtly there as well. Sullivan Fortner on acoustic piano, and he also plays some Rhodes as well. Paolo Maneras bass, and Kush Abadi on drums.
And next from me, perhaps with a similar sense of inspiration, an Aura. Well, the band is called Aura, a fascinating project from Melbourne, Australia. We've had a lot of good jazz out of Australia recently, in this instance via Banff in Canada, because the four ladies in this improvising collective met up at a jazz workshop in Banff led by Vijay Iyer and Taishon Sori, which encouraged recording sessions as well. And they found that they were from nearby in the Melbourne area. They'd never played together. Within 2 days they had a studio and they recorded an improvised album straight to disc. It's very good indeed, it is too. And here's the first track, Then They Ran. female improvising group Aura, led by Flora Carbo on alto and Audrey Pound on the trumpet, with Helen Svoboda on bass and Kiri Anderson at the drums. And their self-titled album, Aura, is available now.
Terrific stuff. It is Jumping In with Chris and myself, H. Another little special for you this week, it being International Women's Day on early this week, Tuesday I think it was, and we thought, why not celebrate women in jazz? Something we have done on several occasions before, I think, over the years, but it seems appropriate once a year off the back of International Women's Day to remember it again. No shortage, it has to be said, of terrific women. Perhaps more now than ever if you go back in the mists of time. Perhaps a few fewer. I mean, some of the great vocalists, your Billies and your Ellas and such like, your Mary Lou Williams, these other unsung heroes perhaps, Melba Liston, people like that. Now, it seems in the younger crowd, in the sort of more modern field, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in France, whether it's in Poland, whether it's in Germany, Japan, there seems to be no end of fantastically talented young women coming out of, quite often having gone to music college, jazz colleges, Berkeley, wherever the case may be. Here's one in question, very much on the local, I say local, I mean the British front, on the British jazz scene, albeit she's part Bahrainian. Yaz Ahmed has been playing for quite a few years now on the scene. I don't think I can ever remember seeing her live. I heard this on the radio recently and thought, this is definitely worth checking out. And indeed it is. It's her second or third album off the top of my head. Certainly not her debut album. Definitely either second or third from memory. It's called Saboteurs, and this is El Amadi. enjoying that one a lot as well. Yaz Ahmed on La Saboteurs. We're just checking as we're listening to that to see. So this was, in fact, the middle of 3 albums that she brought out. So her first album was Finding My Way Home, followed by this one, The Saboteurs, and then Polyhymnia is her latest, which we have got, but we haven't actually featured, I don't think, on the programme yet. On this one, you can hear again, as she says, she's sort of linking up with her sort of roots, as it were. She's British Bahraini, and she's going back. She said she heard Rabi Abu Khalil, who we featured on this programme before, the oud player, who again blends East and West, jazz and sort of Arabic musics to great effect on the various albums that must have been over the years. She was inspired by that and has tried to sort of take that as a starting point for her music into, a blend of a sort of 21st century world music, I guess. And also, in order to help her out, commissioned a unique quarter-tone flugelhorn. She had specially made, she says, by the genius instrument maker Lee McKinney of Eclipse Trumpets. I wanted an instrument that would enable me to play truly centred quarter notes, the blue notes in Arabic music, so that I could immerse myself more completely in exploring the expressive nuances of traditional makams. Yes, this sort of the notes between the notes, as it were, as far as Western music is concerned, but embraced in other musics, particularly in the East. Enjoyed that one a lot, I must admit, and we must try and feature the latest album as well.
Indeed, it's very good. I can tell you, because I have listened to that one, just haven't got around to playing it yet. And truthfully, the number of albums I get now, I'm not really sure that picking out either colour or creed or sex is the first thing I do. It's just whether it's good music. And I think if I honestly did a review of the last year, the ladies would be on equal footing, if not in front of the men. Well, you touched on this before, but I did promise you jazz royalty. There can be none finer than the queen of jazz herself, Ella Fitzgerald. We find her in Japan. What's the weather like there, Ella?
Sugiwa Raymond Tunia, J.C. Hurd, Ray Brown and Herb Ellis, Nobanso Day, Saike Saikono, Utai Te Des, Dozo Ella Fitzgerald.
Grab your coat and get your head. Leave your worries on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Can't you hear the pitter patter? And that happy tune is your step. 'Cause life could be so sweet on the sunny side of the street. I used to walk in the shade with those blues on parade, but I'm not afraid. Crossed over and I'm walking in clover. If I never have a cent, I'll be rich as Rockefeller with gold dust at my feet. On the sunny side of the street, I used to walk in the shade with those blues on parade. But I'm not afraid, 'cause I'm walking over a four-leaf clover. If I never have a cent, I'll be rich as Rockefeller with gold dust at my feet. On the sunny side of the street.
Ella Fitzgerald there on fine form, recorded live at the Nichigeki Theatre in 1953 with the Jazz at
It's
the
not
Phil.
easy to say that after a couple of...
I need my teeth back, thank you. At the Jazz at the Phil in Tokyo with Raymond Tunia as announced on piano, Herb Ellis on guitar, Ray Brown on the bass, J.C. Hurd at the drums. And a great album it is too, with all the Jazz at the Phil stars, including among others Roy Eldridge, Charlie Shavers, Ben Webster, Oscar Peterson and Flip Phillips and many more. Great stuff.
It is terrific stuff. We were just saying, I think neither of us admit to being massive jazz vocal fans. And I know lots of people are, and I can see that by and large, for a lot of music festivals and such like, putting a vocalist in increases the numbers. Not for us necessarily. I always think, oh, there's vocals. Well, never mind. Yeah, sometimes I think, go along and think, okay, you know what, that wasn't too bad at all. But we were both saying, you know, you cannot really go wrong with Ella or Sarah Vaughan
Or Billie Holiday.
or maybe more recently things like Karen Croak and lady coming up a few moments, Norma Winston as well. Absolutely brilliant.
This is Jane Ara Bloom, and you're listening to Jumpin' In with Chris and H on Manx Radio.
recent discovery, for me at least in any case, Julieta Eugenio, who is from Argentina, tenor saxophonist and composer, started out in Argentina, as I say, relocated to New York City, where else? Around about 10 years ago. And in the middle of the pandemic, I suppose lots of people have been trying to find, as we're hearing from Melissa there, people perhaps trying to find their way during the pandemic. She started collaborating with the bassist Matt Dwanzik, who I'm not aware of, and drummer Jonathan Barber, who I am, wonderful young drummer who's played with Jeremy Pelt, amongst other people. I've certainly heard him on a couple of Pelt albums. They were meeting regularly to workshop her music and then developed sort of an intricate chemistry forged around, as it says, her insightful compositions. And as soon as they could, they were back out into the studio and recorded 8 originals, from quite introspective stuff through to some fairly funky stuff, one called Raccoon Tune, which is quite nice. That one is called La Jungla. And yes, really enjoyed it as well. I have always been a fan of the sax trio ever since I heard, I think, Way Out West and Live at the Vanguard and such like with tenor saxophonist Sonny Rollins, of course. And it's one of those places where it sort of shows everyone up. There's nowhere to hide for the drummer, bassist or the sax player. And so if you can't play, get out of the kitchen, as it were. But I would like to think you would agree. They all can. Wonderful stuff. It is out now on, you can get it on Bandcamp, but also it's on Dave Douglas's Greenleaf label. So if you want the real CD as well, which I probably would normally, but I wanted it for this programme, you can check it out there.
Very nice indeed. And yes, I'm a fan of that format as well. And we promised you International Women of Jazz, and I think we're certainly delivering that. So next, for me, Beirut-born pianist Zayla Morgosian, with a set of tunes drawing clearly on her Armenian heritage. The Road is her sophomore album following the highly acclaimed and award-nominated debut Transition. And here's Refuge.
Hello, I'm Julia Hülsmann. You're listening to Jumping In with Chris and H.
If you could search the atmosphere, could you retrace stepping stones in space, things you missed along the way, caught in the race? Still you look behind. I am looking too, hoping to glimpse the child again.
The evergreen Norma Winston, back there when she was, well, a bit younger, as we all were, than she is now. Yes, it comes to us all, doesn't it? 1972 to be exact. Edge of Time, one of her, if it wasn't her earliest album, it's certainly way up there one way or another. John Taylor featured on piano, great lineup on that, but there's certainly John Taylor on piano there, and either Art Thiemann or Alan Skidmore, I can't quite decide who that is, on soprano sax by the sound of it. Very fine indeed.
And before that, we heard the wonderful Zella Margosian on piano, perhaps putting me in mind of Tigran Himayasson to an extent, with Stuart van der Graaf on sax, Adam Yilmaz on Middle Eastern percussion, Jacques Emery on bass, and Alexander Inman Hislop on the drums. Well, that's just about it for our special show, showing that the fairer sex can teach the boys a thing or two when it comes to swing. We'll just leave you with a taster from multi-instrumentalist Nala Seinfro. Her highly rated album, she grew up on Martinique and Belgium, where she discovered the harp in the school music room, belonging to somebody else, I might add, and she secretly taught herself to play it. After fighting off a threatening life-threatening tumour in her 20s, she found her music to be medicinal, and she moved herself to London to do a music course, packed that in, works in a record shop, put a record together, and is going out gigging around and about. Her debut disc, Space 1.8, sees her playing her own style of ambient grooves on harp and modular synths, along with a raft of London's top young talent, including Nubia Garcia, James Mollison on saxes, Emma Jane Thackeray on additional keyboards, but we'll hear her on her own with Space 1. See you next week.
Look after yourselves.
Bye for now.